Girivanadari. Yesodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yesodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Ballava Girivanadari. Girivanadari Ballava Girivanadari. Jaya Gopijana Ballava Girivanadari. Yesodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Nandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yesodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Oh, Pranandi, Hari Hari Bo. Jayam Vishnu Papa Mahansa Papa Kacharya Stata Satashi Shriman. His Divine Loving Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jayam Vishnu Papa Mahansa Papa Kacharya Stata Satashi Shriman. His Divine Loving Grace Srila Bhakti-Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Koi Vaishnavinda Ki. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki. Brahm Shri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Gadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki. Vrindavan Dham Ki. Tulsi Devi Ki. Bhakti Devi Ki. Samaveda Bhaktavinda Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this evening we are covering chapter 13, verse 33 in the Bhagavad-Gita. Yathā sarva-gataṁ saukṣmyād. ākāśaṁ nopalipyate. sarvatrāvasthito dehe. tathātmā nopalipyate. yathā sarva-gataṁ saukṣmyād. ākāśaṁ nopalipyate. sarvatrāvasthito dehe. tathātmā nopalipyate. yathā sarva-gataṁ saukṣmyād. ākāśaṁ nopalipyate. sarvatrāvasthito dehe. tathātmā nopalipyate. yathā sarva-gataṁ saukṣmyād. ākāśaṁ nopalipyate. sarvatrāvasthito dehe. tathātmā nopalipyate. yathā sarva-gataṁ saukṣmyād. ākāśaṁ nopalipyate. sarvatrāvasthito dehe. tathātmā nopalipyate. Yathā sarva-gataṁ saukṣmyād. ākāśaṁ nopalipyate. sarvatrāvasthito dehe. tathātmā nopalipyate. Yathā sarva-gataṁ saukṣmyād. ākāśaṁ nopalipyate. sarvatrāvasthito dehe. tathātmā nopalipyate. Yathā sarva-gataṁ saukṣmyād. ākāśaṁ nopalipyate. sarvatrāvasthito dehe. tathātmā nopalipyate. Yathā, as sarva-gatam, all-pervading, saukṣmyād, due to being subtle, ākāśaṁ, the sky, na, never, upalipyate, mixes, sarvatra, everywhere, avasthitaḥ, situated, dehe, in the body, tathā, so, ātmā, the self, na, never, upalipyate, mixes. Translation. The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the soul, situated in Brahman vision, does not mix with the body, though situated in that body. Srila Prabhupada's Purport. The air enters into water, mud, stool, and whatever else is there. Still, it does not mix with anything. Similarly, the living entity, even though situated in various varieties of bodies, is aloof from them due to his subtle nature. Therefore, it is impossible to see with material eyes how the living entity is in contact with this body and how he is out of it after the destruction of the body. No one in science can ascertain this. Let's read the together. Let's please repeat the translation. The sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the soul situated in Brahman vision does not mix with the body, though situated in that body. Om Ajnana-timrandasya jananjana salakaya chaksun militanyena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha Shri Chaitanya manobhistam tapitam yena bhutale swayam rupa kadanmayam dadanti swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vidamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopisa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosate Tap Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaur Premanandi Jai. So I thought it would be helpful this evening if we kind of took a lens out and looked at this situation. As we're in chapter 13, and Arjuna is becoming very serious about his Krishna consciousness. And when he started, as you remember in the first chapter, he had a dark night of the soul, a very difficult situation where he could no longer even hold his Gandiva bow. And then Krishna goes into chapter 2 and it starts to instruct Arjuna. And the first instruction he is giving him is that he's not that body. And Krishna does a very elaborate, conclusive argument about not being this material body, because this is the beginning of spiritual understanding, is understanding we're not this body. But that's only the first part of that understanding. The second part is even more important. The second part is that I am an eternal servant of Krishna. Nicha Siddha Krishna Das. Now the Mayavadis, they don't understand that. And actually it's kind of interesting when we look at the whole Mayavadi thing, because it's so pervasive in this material world. There are few people that you will speak to who are not tinged with Mayavadi philosophy, who are not thinking in somehow or another that they are God. And this is a condition of the material world, because it's a condition of envy. Oh, if God has 6 opulences, I must be God. I just don't know it yet, right? But it's also completely hampers one's ability to have any real spiritual life. So now we're coming to the 13th chapter, and Arjuna starts off by asking, like a good disciple, he's inquiring submissively to the spiritual master, whose Krishna has taken the position of spiritual master. And he's asking these 6 questions. He's asking about Prakriti. What is Prakriti? The material energy. He's asking, who's the enjoyer? Who's the Purusha? He's asking, what is the Kshetram? The field. He's asking, who's Kshetram Jnana? Who's the knower of that field? He's asking about Jnana, knowledge. And he's asking about Niyam, the object of that knowledge. And these are very, very basic, important questions that we all need to understand. And Krishna explains that. And he explains that the field of activities is for the conditioned soul is the material body. And it's a product of Prakriti. The body is simply a product of the material nature. And according to his capacity to dominate the material nature, and according to his ability to enjoy sense gratification, the living entity is existing in that field. In one lecture Srila Prabhupada gave in Bombay on this chapter, he gave a great analogy. He says, in Bombay, everybody is going here and there. It's such a busy place. And they're doing so many things. But no one is saying, I am Bombay. But in the material world, everyone is saying, I am this body, no matter what body they take. And there's such a variety, right? 8,400,000 different varieties. So this Kshetrajna is the knower of the body, is the soul who is in that body. He's different from the body. And that's the condition. In order to be called kshetrajna, one has to know that he's not the same as the body, because the body is temporary, whereas the knower of the body is not temporary. So the body is non-permanent thing, and the kshetrajna, he's eternal. So those who think the body is a self are not the knowers of the field, Krishna says, because they don't know the real nature or function of the body. So what the jiva knows is limited, though, with the body, right? I mean, we know we have a body, it has senses, and it has systems. It has a respiratory system, it has a circulatory system, different things, digestive system. But and even a doctor, does a doctor know all these systems? No, only if he's specialized in one, he will know one. But there's so many things about this body that we just live in and we just accept. But there's another knower of this body. And that knower is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he's taken this position as Paramatma. He's expanded himself as Paramatma into each and every living entity's body, no matter what type of body it is, no matter where that body goes. It could go to a high, elevated heavenly planet, or to a most disgusting low place in the lower planetary systems. And Krishna goes. And if we contemplate just that fact for a little bit, we can begin to understand how much love, how much compassion Krishna has for his jivas, that he never leaves them alone in this horrible material world. He's always with them. He's always there, waiting for them to turn to him. He's always encouraging in subtle ways, never controlling them, but only encouraging them. So Krishna is also kshetrajna chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetru. He's the knower of all the bodies. He's the knower of not only the body, my body, which I'm the knower of, but he's the knower of everyone's bodies here, and everyone's bodies out everywhere. I can only know my body. I don't know the pleasures and pains of your body. One body is enough to know. But Krishna is the knower of all these things. He's also Hrishikesh, the controller of the senses. So he's controlling all these senses. And the individual soul is subordinate. Krishna is infallible where we are fallible. Krishna's opinion is jnana, is perfect knowledge when we understand the material body, its knower, the soul and the super soul. When we can make these distinctions, he considers that perfect knowledge. So real knowledge means understanding the separate existence of the Lord, the jiva, and the prakriti. Though they mix together, they never become one. So Krishna, he's in the position of guru here, instructing Arjuna. And so he's giving quotes of authorities, of the Vedas, of guru, of shastras, and sadhus. And this is the position of the guru. The guru is always giving this lineup of the knowledge is the same between the sadhus, the shastra, and the guru. Is they are all teaching the same thing, going in the same direction. They are all in agreement. So the kshetra, the body, is composed of 5 elements, right? The great elements, the mahabhuta, earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then there's the false ego, the hankara, the intelligence, the buddhi, and the unmanifested state of the 3 modes of material nature. The 10 senses, mind, the sense objects. So, can we name the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses? The eyes, nose, ears, touch, skin, tongue, Good. The 5 working senses, that's the voice, the legs, the hands, the anus, the genitals. The 5 sense objects, smell, taste, form, touch, sound. So we have the mind, the intelligence, the false ego, the pradhana. All these combined making 24 elements. This is the kshetra. This is the body. And Krishna explains what affects the body, because it can change due to different things like determination, uncertainty, faith, faithlessness, etc. So many things. And then there's the basic changes of the body, right? There's the birth, the growth, the maintenance, maturity, decline, and death, yes. So in verse 8 to 12, Krishna gives the most astounding thing. He tells us how to acquire knowledge. And it's not like one would think we've been trained to acquire knowledge in the material world. Because it begins with humility. And it's acquiring these saintly qualities. And, have you ever heard of a university that you go and fill out the form for the university and they ask you, are you humble? No, they don't do that in the university. So, in these saintly qualities, by which the soul can disentangle himself from the material body and attain liberation. So Krishna declares it clearly that these items are knowledge and everything else is ignorance. And of these 20 factors, 18 are common to the jnanis. But the 16th one, exclusive devotion to Krishna, is a special qualification of devotees. The other qualities will automatically manifest for those who have this quality, pure devotion. So what is our focus on? Our focus is on pure devotion. So having taught the process for attaining knowledge, Krishna now teaches what is to be known, jneyam, the real object of knowledge. The real object of knowledge of Jivatma, individual soul, Paramatma, the super soul, who is an expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By knowing the knowable, we will attain liberation. Jiva is the beginningless subordinate to Krishna and is beyond the cause and effect of this material world. So Krishna explains in this chapter the qualities of Paramatma, which are both mysterious and subtle. And we'll speak about this word subtle a little more. Everywhere are his hands and legs. Everywhere are his eyes, heads and faces. Everywhere are his ears. He is all-pervading. He is the source of all senses, yet he is devoid of material senses. He is unattached, though he is the maintainer of all. He is the master of modes, yet transcendental to them. He is outside and inside of all moving, non-moving beings. He moves and he doesn't move. He is subtle and thus not knowable by material senses. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. He is never divided, although he appears to be divided among all beings. He is situated as one. He is the maintainer of all beings and also their destroyer. He is the savior of light. He is the source of light in all illuminated objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and he is the good of knowledge. He is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. He explains, only my devotee understands this and thus attains to my nature. Thus, Krishna explains how the jiva comes in contact with Maya. Before the creation, the jiva, the prakriti, was all in subtle form, in Mahavishnu. And at the time of the creation, the living entities were given a chance to act in the material world and prepare themselves to enter the spiritual world. Who is the Purusha? The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Purusha, the master, controller, enjoyer, proprietor, and maintainer of the entire cosmos. There's also another Purusha. The Jiva is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. He is not the controller, but still he's sometimes called Purusha due to his mentality of being the master. Thus the word Purusha is used for both. Prakriti, or material nature, is said to be the cause of all material causes and effect. The Purusha, or living entity, is the cause of his own happiness and distress due to his enjoying propensities. The relationship between the Jiva and the Prakriti. The Prakriti offers the body with the senses, which produces happiness and distress. The Jiva suffers or enjoys due to his misidentification with the body. So the soul is changing bodies constantly under the influence of the material desires. The living entity is born sometimes as a demigod, sometimes as a man, sometimes as a beast, a bird, a worm, an aquatic, etc., 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 etc. And in all cases, the living entity is thinking that he's the enjoyer. He's thinking he's the master of his life. And yet, he is under the modes of material nature. This is due to the Jiva's misidentification with the Prakriti and the misuse of his minute independence. So Supersoul, the real Purusha, Paramatma, overseer, he permits the Jiva's actions. He permits him to act as an enjoyer, yet he is always there for the Jiva. The result of this knowledge about Prakriti, Purusha, and the modes, one will attain liberation. Some see Paramatma through meditation. Some see him by cultivation of knowledge, and others by working without fruitive desires. And others, although not having knowledge, worship the Supreme Lord upon hearing about him. They surpass the path of birth and death due to their faithful hearing from authoritative persons. And so this is where we're at. We're attaining the highest goal, the Supreme Lord, through hearing. Krishna answered all of Arjuna's questions about Kshetra, Jnana, Purusha, and Prakriti. In the rest of the chapter, he explains on all the different verses. He explains in detail the vision of one who can understand from the proper perspective. So one who has mature vision due to real knowledge sees the Supreme Lord distinct from the Jivas, but situated in the Jivas who are combined with Prakriti. From this type of vision, one does not degrade himself by his mind. Thus he attains spiritual world. So one sees the soul is transcendental, beginningless, endless, or imperishable, and beyond the modes of material nature. Despite being situated in the material body, the soul doesn't do anything and is not entangled. So this verse, the sky, due to the subtle nature, does not mix with anything, although it is all-pervading. Similarly, the soul situated in Brahman vision does not mix with the body, though situated in that body. There are elements that are very subtle. For example, there's the mind. We can't see it, and there isn't a scientific machine or microscope that can show anyone the mind. And the same with the soul. If you could dissect every small particle of the body, you could never find the soul. because it is so subtle. But we have proof of these existences, because when the soul leaves the body, there is a distinct change. And everywhere, over the world, they'll tell you, oh, he's gone, he's left. They've left that body. There's no life in that body. That life is the soul. Actually, Srila Prabhupada, when he was in California in the 60s, they had a program for him at a school that was younger children. And Srila Prabhupada, he played this game with the children. He said to them, he says, point to your foot, point to your hand, point to your head. He says, and now point to you. And so the child became a bit confused. Wait, me, what am I? Am I this hand? Am I this foot? No, we could do without a hand or a foot and still be whole person. But so the understanding we're not that body, there's lots of examples that are very, very conducive. So the soul is very subtle. So when the soul associates with the material any prakriti, it becomes illusion. And that prakriti, that's gross. It's intense. It's very thick. Like, for example, when the living entity is under the illusion that they are this material body, and they are thinking, oh, I'm going to go eat out at this big restaurant and have a big meal. This is gross matter that they're trying to consume. It may end up making them sick. Or it may, nonetheless, there will be a satiated point where the living entity cannot enjoy this any longer. But what's interesting is no matter what body the living entity is given, one after the other, he becomes attached to that body. And he becomes thinking that this is the all in all. Even if he's in a pig body, oh, I have a nice pigsty with lots of mud and stool and all kinds of other pigs to play with. This is a wonderful thing. But when death comes and throws him out of that body into what? A next body, maybe a fish body. I'm not sure of the way it goes. But he's thrown into a different body. But in that different body, he's now thinking, oh, I want to swim in the ocean. I want to eat these other fish. I want to play with the bubbles. So many different ways. It's a whole different attachment to different things. And then he comes to the form of this human form of life, which is a great value because this is the only form of life that one can understand they're not this body. And one can understand about spiritual life. And so if they're fortunate, they come into contact with Lord Chaitanya's movement or his very special devotees like Srila Prabhupada. And the jiva takes to this process of chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And thus they begin to remember, and they begin to remember about the Lord. They begin to chanting about the Lord, serving the Lord, becoming the Lord's friend, and surrendering everything to the Lord. And then one is very quickly able to give us this gross attachment to this material world and to give up the trying to engage with this gross material world. By following in this process, one's interests change. They absolutely change, and it's fun to watch that when you see a new devotee come to the temple, and they may come with some bad habits, some different things, and you watch them as they keep coming, and you watch them start to give up this and that, and start to take on chanting, start to take on hearing more, and you watch them give up these different desires. And we can also see that in ourselves, you know. We don't have desires to go watch TV, a soccer match, or go to social events. We just would rather serve Krishna. So we can see this in the devotees' activities. We can see this in people who are very serious about their Krishna consciousness. These material things are not very interesting to them. A materialist may work very hard all day, and the whole time they can't wait to get home and put their feet up and do nothing but watch TV. But a devotee, they work hard all day too. But they're just thinking then of going home and showering and coming back and taking darshan of the deities. It's subtle. It's a subtle, but it's definite. And so this is our challenge, is that we have the knowledge. We know Kshetragya. And we know that this body, and we know who the real Purusha is. So we can attain that which is worth attaining. And a nice illustration of this is in the Srimad Bhagavatam with King Chitraketu. King Chitraketu was a very opulent king. He had 10 million wives. But still, he was overcome with lamentation because the one thing he wanted, a son, he couldn't have. He couldn't have a son. So he was so sad about this, even though he had everything else that anyone could have ever desired. So one day, Angira Rishi came and visited the sage, and he saw on the sage's face, he saw how unhappy he was. So Angira was pleased by the reception from the king, and he asked him, "What's wrong? Why are you so sad?" And the king, he opened up his heart and he told him, he says, I want a son so badly. It's my duty to have a son, and I can't have a son. Even though I have all this, it's worthless to me without a son. So Angira did a sacrifice, and he gave him just enough sweet rice in the sacrifice for one wife to have a son. So he gave it to his wife, and she had a beautiful son. And his happiness knew no bounds. In fact, Angira told him, he will be the cause of great happiness and great lamentation. So Angira became so infatuated with this child and with the mother of this child, he neglected all 10 million other queens. And they became very, very envious and angry, to the point they poisoned the child. This flies. I must have annoyed it in its last life. So, King Chitraketu, thank you. Thank you. So King Chitraketu, so they poisoned this child, and when the king heard that his child was dead, he became completely dysfunctional. He was like blind. He couldn't walk. He kept slipping and falling. And his lamentation grew like a fire. And he couldn't even speak. And so at this time, Angira and Narada Muni came to visit him. And this was significant because they began to explain, they tried to explain to him that this relationship in the material world as father-son, mother-daughter, father-daughter, husband-wife, brother, sister, all these are not real. They're simply representations of the illusory energy. They're temporary. They're all material relationships that cause misery. So this whole cosmic manifestation is made up of such relationships. Although not real, they are factual. A temporary arrangement, but they cause suffering. So when one wants to understand their spiritual identity and surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one becomes actually happy. And when one searches for happiness in matter, one certainly laments for the bodily relationship. So self-realization means spiritual relation of one's relationship with Krishna. Such realization ends one's miserable material life. So it was interesting in this section of the Bhagavad-Gita where Narada Muni, by his mystic power, brought the child back to life. And the child had reached some realizations after passing. And he says this, it's quite interesting. By the mystic, the child said, according to the results of my fruitive activities, I, the living being, transmigrate from one body to another, sometimes going to the species of demigods, sometimes to the species of lower animals, sometimes among vegetables, and sometimes to the human species. Therefore, in which birth were these my mother and father? No one is actually my mother and father. How can I accept these two people as my parents? So it's kind of interesting when we come to that realization, all these other mundane relationships become very unimportant. And so we could put that much energy into cultivating and developing our devotion for Sri Krishna. So he goes on to say, in this material world, which advances like a river that carries away the living entity, all people become friends, relatives, and enemies in due course of time. They also act neutrally. They mediate. They despise one another, and they act in many other relationships. Nonetheless, despite these various transactions, no one is permanently related. Just as gold and other commodities are continually transferred from one place to another in due course of purchase and sale, so the living entity, as a result of his fruitive activities, wanders throughout the entire universe, being injected into various bodies in different species of life by one kind of father after another. A few living entities are born in the human species, and others are born as animals. Although both are living entities, their relationships are impermanent. An animal may remain in the custody of a human being for some time, and then the same animal may be transferred to the possession of other human beings. As soon as the animal goes away, the former proprietor no longer has a sense of ownership. As long as the animal is in his possession, he certainly has an affinity for it. But as soon as the animal is sold, the affinity is lost. So even though one living entity becomes connected with another because of relationships based on bodies that are perishable, the living entity is eternal. Actually, it is the body that is born or lost, not the living entity. One should not accept that the living entity takes birth or dies. The living being actually has no relationship with so-called fathers and mothers. As long as he appears as the son of a certain father and mother, as a result of his past fruitive activities, he has a connection with the body given by that father and mother. Thus he falsely accepts himself as their son and acts affectionately. After he dies, however, the relationship is finished. Under these circumstances, one should not be falsely involved with jubilation and lamentation. So this is this great knowledge that Srila Prabhupada has brought from the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-Gita to help us alleviate these miseries in the material world. Are we alleviating the misery of the heat in the material world? Jai. So, Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavad-Gita ki jai. Does anybody want to add anything or questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Mataji, I was hearing on FM and then I came later. I was hearing on radio, this class.
Oh, okay.
So I just came in the last. So don't become angry that he came in the last and asking questions.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Mataji, like very nicely you relate this story of Chitraketu Maharaj. But in practical life, like especially grasthas, when they have wife, children, and when you hear pastimes like this, even in Bhagavad-Gita, like we hear that, you understand me, what I'm speaking?
I speak a little slower because
Okay.
the sound is a little weird.
Like when we hear this pastime of Maharaj Chitraketu, as you said, and then Bhagavatam or hear Krishna Katha, then this detachment comes in the heart. That these children are, especially about the grastha, this is not my children, it's my wife or something, like whatever relation, father, mother. So one developed the detachment. One developed the detachment from relationship. But this detachment, he cannot like be irresponsible at the same time.
Right. Good point.
So how these both things go together, that one cannot become irresponsible at the same time detached.
Yes, that's a good point because it's our service. If we're a mother or father, it's our service to take care of this child. So our service is to help that child become Krishna conscious. So we need to learn what is the best way to encourage that child in their spiritual life. And even then, there's no guarantee, but we can't be attached to the results either. But that's our service to Krishna, is by helping this living entity get back to home, back to Godhead. And actually that's something I've always very much admired in the Indian culture, is because they do have a lot of affection for their children, and because they have a very strong devotional attitude, and they're very good at expressing it and showing their devotion to God. The children see this and they follow it. It's a natural progression. But it's true. It's not easy to be detached, especially from our children. But if we keep it on as much as possible, keep it on a spiritual platform, so that we have a responsibility to become devotees so that they can become devotees. So they can see, my father's a devotee, and this is like Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada very much appreciated his father. Gaur Mohan was a beautiful example of a devotee. He would come home from every day from the shop, the cloth shop, and he would worship the deity. And Prabhupada at a very young age saw this and appreciated this. And he saw Gaur Mohan's devotion and how he respected sadhus. And he'd ask every sadhu, please pray for my son that he becomes a devotee of Srimati Radharani. So these are great examples for us in our devotion. Because unfortunately, it's Kali Yuga. Not everyone's going to be interested in Krishna consciousness. And so, on the most part, our biggest, most contributing thing we can do is be devotees ourselves. We're not going to be able to preach it into them.
Yes, Mataji, like this, like somebody trying to be a devotee, he neglects the duties. Trying to be a devotee, then neglect the normal duties. But sometime in the name of preaching, sometime in the name of the whatever devotional activities, and then
Are they neglecting their duties?
Like normal responsibility for, let us say, wife for husband, husband for wife, and parents for children.
Well,
So
I mean, if you're running off to the temple to do service and you're neglecting your household life, that's not a great example. Children won't appreciate that either. If the mother goes off to cook a nice preparation for the deities and spends all day there and the kids have nothing to eat, they're not going to think that's a very nice activity. They're not going to be attracted to Krishna consciousness. So we have to find a balance. We have to find a balance. And we have to create that. It's really an internal process. It's not so external. A lot of times we get caught up in the externals. I want to be at the temple and in the kirtan, and I want to do this, I want to do that. But it's an internal process. It's what's going on inside. What's in our hearts? Am I really pleasing Krishna? That's what we want to. We want to really please Krishna, not just impress the other devotees. Oh, look at how well I can cook. What does that matter if your children are hungry or neglected?
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
I needed to ask you, like when there is sufferings in a devotee's life, am I speaking loud? Okay.
When they're suffering?
In a devotee's life. So I've heard I need to find out, is it the devotee's karma or is it the mercy of the Lord? Because I've heard through my Guru Maharaj, he said that when there's something good in your life, you accept it as the Lord's mercy. And when there's something bad in your life, you accept it as karma. But I've also heard that the Lord gives us sufferings because He loves us so much and He wants us to bring us closer to Him. So I'm just trying to understand that when there's sufferings in our life, how do we, because if it's karma, it's painful. But if it's the Lord's mercy, then we'll accept it, knowing that, it's like that.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, but that's really a higher consciousness. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, for the devotees, when we're suffering, it's not just karma. Krishna's especially taken whatever that is, that karma, and has tailored it so that it helps us become Krishna conscious. And a lot of times, our suffering is really is illusion. It's just our concept of way things should be. But Krishna is arranging things in our lives so that this will bring us to Him as fast as possible. And when we can accept that, actually Prabhupada also says that. He says when a devotee is suffering and a devotee says to Krishna, I deserve worse, then Krishna immediately has mercy on the devotee. So our mentality is very important, and how we accept these things. And it's our challenge, is when things happen, is that we can say, this is Krishna's mercy. But maybe we're not feeling that. We're not feeling that right now. But later on, we may see how that developed into a very great blessing. There were so many, I think it was this morning, they were talking in the Bhagavad-Gita class about so many people who were cursed. And the curse actually became a great blessing. Like Nirmala June trees. They were cursed because they were acting foolishly, running around naked with Gandharvas and in front of a sage. So they were cursed to be trees. But they were blessed because Krishna saved them from that situation. And from there, they became great devotees. So sometimes suffering makes us humble. And we were reading that humility is the beginning of knowledge. So suffering is actually has a lot of good qualities to it. We just need to look for those qualities and then train our mind to accept these things as Krishna's mercy. Okay? All right. Jai. Bhagavad-Gita ki jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.